beyond the headlines of Recipients TV. It's a trusted platform where we go deeper, ask the tough questions, and uncover the real meaning behind the news shaping our society. Today, we turn our attention to a developing issue in Nigeria's education and social space. The recent directive, maybe just another directive that has been done before, by the National Universities Commission, banning the use of doctor recipients of honorary degrees. For years, honorary doctorates have been awarded by universities to recognize outstanding contributors in fields such as business, politics, philanthropy, and the arts. However, this recognition has often sparked confusion, with many recipients adopting the title doctor in formal and informal settings, sometimes blurring the line between earned academic qualifications and honorary recognition. The NUC's decision is seen by many as a move to restore the integrity of academic titles and protect the value of rigorous scholarly achievement. It has also opened up a broader conversation. And part of the question is, should honorary degree holders be restricted from using such titles as doctor? Does this decision diminish their contributions to society? Or is it a necessary step to preserve academic standards in Nigeria's higher education system? The issue is particularly significant in a country like Nigeria, where titles carry immense social weight and often influence perception, authority, and even opportunities. So, joining us this morning to answer some of these questions is a development economist, a chartered accountant, a public affairs analyst, Professor Chibuke. Prof, good morning.
Good morning, Papa Knight.
Well, Prof brings a wealth of insight into government education policy and societal values. Okay, Prof, let's once again welcome you. The question I'm asking you is, what specifically prompted, well, when you heard about this, let me even start from, when you heard about the NUC's, the directive, it's not a law, it's a advisory note, a guideline. When you heard it, just 1 or 2 weeks ago, what came to your mind? Wow.
Well, first thing was that it depicts NUC as a listening government agency. If you recall, sometime last year, around August, September, October, a group of persons wrote several joined us, or what we may call articles and all that, on the standardization of doctor, by a lot of people. And when they wrote that, I also remember that I wrote a rejoinder because the perspective from which they presented the matter didn't sync well with me personally then. And I wrote that doctor, red title, or professor title is not the problem. And I even pushed back against some of us who are PhD holders and professors. And my argument was that we constitute major crisis in the system. And I looked at it from the perspective of electoral malpractices, collecting of bribes for students and all the rest of it all. But it doesn't diminish the key message that the use of the title doctor, even professor recently, has been bastardized. So when I read the news in February, I said truly NUC is one of the government agencies that are listening to the people and also understood the on ground to be able to feel the pulse of the nation. So I feel it's a welcomed development. Unfortunately, NUC can only regulate that what happens in the universities. They just discovered recently there are some mushroom schools, even in NUC, who say they are doing executive programs that are giving people DBA. and all that. And those that are doing 2 months executive DBA course are already using doctors before their name. So, and you see, and I'm sure in the course of this conversation, we'll look at issue about guidelines beyond enforcement, because you can issue a guideline or directive if there are no enforcement. It becomes what I usually say on air every time, control the same people. But for me, it's a welcome development.
Okay. Actually, is a welcome development to you and to some people who have spent millions and millions to buy or earn, because they think that somebody is trying to take away their evidence of their hard work, their financial contributions to making universities look better, maybe building a structure and all that. But I know a lot of universities abroad do that.
Yes.
But I know one university in America. It does not matter what you give them. You can give them the whole world. They will never give you even a diploma. That is MIT.
Okay.
It's standard. They don't do it. They don't have 5 doctorates honorary to anybody. And this is one university that people companies think money into. They don't. So, okay, now that if the doctor is banned for honorary doctorate degree recipients, what post-nominal abbreviation should they be used? How would they now address themselves? Because the idea is you go and give 20 million, 50 million to university, and then they say, come on, during convocation. They decorate you and call you doctor. And then you swallow out and begin to answer the name. So what post-nominal abbreviation should they use?
Okay, if you look at that guy,
and how should they actually introduce themselves?
If you look at that guy, but let me move back to MIT before I answer your question. What I think, what I, personally, if I'm a vice chancellor of a university, I may not award people honorary doctorates degrees. What I may opt for would be to have a hall of fame.
Yeah, they do that.
Where I recognize those kinds of
maybe buildings
and
roads
and all that. Yes. That's the best I would do. But beyond that, the guidelines from the National University Commission was specific on how such persons should address themselves. What has happened is that you won't use the prefix doctor, but you can use the postfix if there's anything like that. But in that case, you won't say also doctor. What you say is that if it's LLD, that is Doctor of Letters or Doctor of...
Okay, so it's DDD.
So say DDDL in brackets, honorary course.
HC.
So in that case, you know that it's an honor. It's not something you earned in the real sense of academic setting. But it won't give the weight that Dr. this thing. So most of them may not do that, because you can't even address somebody and say, Chief Cyril Uchenna and NUC, honorary LLD, honorary cosa. The thing comes down and all that. But the government made it very clear that this is how they should be addressed. That's if they want to.
That is if they want to.
So because most of them, and that takes me back to my earlier opening remarks. This directive was issued to the universities. So when universities are writing to those men or those women whom they've offered or awarded honorary degrees, they will write it the way the NUC may have
awarded DDD.
But the big question is that for the MC who is somewhere, or for somebody who is writing to them, there are a lot of governors. In fact, the duty of this directive also, I don't know whether it's part of the things you discuss in this program, was that directive says that for self-nominees who are elected or appointed are still in public office, they should not be given honorary doctorate award. So what it means is that for some governors, some House of Reps members, senators that are enjoying it now, because in Nigeria, when you become anything, especially for public sector and all that, the universities want to fraternize, and part of the way they fraternize is to award you honorary doctorate. So the rule says, as long as you are still in government, either as an elected person or appointed person, no university should award that person honorary
What of those people now who are already carrying the name?
Well, what it means that also the universities should not recognize them by writing them doctor, barrister, doctor. Those kind of things should cease. So you write their names at the end. You can say LLD in bracket HC. And it's important because NUC must go a step further on this thing. Because if there's no enforcement and penalties, then nothing has happened.
Well, Nigeria is a different climate, and things like this may not work. To enforcement, you mentioned it in passing. How do you think that NUC and society at large should enforce this? Because and sometimes it's not even those who were awarded that on their own begin to use the name. It's either their own supporters and praise singers that begin to call them by that name, and suddenly it will stick. I know a guy who said, "Look, I'm not a prince." He's not calling himself a prince. He's not a prince by any standard. After 1 month, they start calling the guy prince. He said, "Prince." Some are not pastors. He said, "I'm a man of God, man of God." Suddenly he begins to answer. So the Nigerian society will appear to be guilty because I have not seen some of these people who received it who on their own so they're writing that. It is people like us, even journalists, who begin to address them as that. Some go get in America, if you're elected to become a professor.
Yes.
But they hardly, even those in America, hardly call themselves that.
Yes.
You earn professorship, tenured professors,
Yes.
and all that.
Yes.
But our people will also get it and they start answering professors. So it's a Nigerian thing.
Yes.
So what do you think, honestly, will be the enforcement? What will it look like?
Yeah. First of all, the universities already know that if they fail to comply with these directives, but beyond that, for the recipients and for those, it was recently before now. We spray money like no man's land. Even when the law said that you are not supposed to spray money, there is manipulation and all that. And the EFCC used 1 or 2 persons to portray example, whether it's politically induced or not, but it brought some little of sanity to our people, change their mindset. I think the first thing we need to do, outside just enforcement or penalties and all that, is to do more of sensitization. That has not happened beyond what the news has just said.
Yes.
I think the university, even the government on their own, needs to do that. You might say that those that are awarded this thing, they may not be the ones that are doing it. But I know some governors on whose official portrait, shade that's what people call it. Call it. You see the person write the name, put the doctor. When the person knows, and it's allowed. So in law, that is an accomplice already. It's unnecessary. So sometimes the law can be made in such a way. But what I'm trying to say is that there may be need to amend the UC law or the Education Establishment Act to make provisions to this, because this is just a directive. It's a guideline. It's not, even though the Education Establishment Act of 2004 and the NUC gives them the power to make guidelines and directives on education standards, but there's no enforcement yet. So there may be need to introduce, because part of the things I did this morning was also look at if NUC have the right to issue this kind of guidelines. So when I was reading both the NUC law and the Education Establishment guideline, I said, okay, they cannot derive this power based on it. Because a guideline cannot subsume the Universities Establishment Act that gives the governing council and the Senate the power to determine the number of persons to be awarded honorary degree and the modalities and all the rest of it. So, but based on these new laws, which are expressly established, NUC is within their rights to issue these guidelines, which is just the guidelines, not a law. So it's important also for real enforcement that proper enforcement guidelines and penalties associated with non-conformity, both at the university level, tertiary level, and also on the recipient level, and also on the general public level, or what will be the penalties for lack of enforcement or compliance, not enforcement, compliance to the directives that have been issued. But more importantly, before enforcement or penalties, I think we need to sensitize and conscientize our people on the implications of this thing. For the person, the one I told you earlier on in the NUC school in Enugu that is awarding people stuff. The owner of that school, this association, Forum of Academic Doctors, the person was a member there. So when I saw that he was a member, I started him outside and I raised the issue. So he wanted to start covering up. I said, okay, I'll get the Ministry of Education involved and other secretary. So he now had the split. I said, okay, but you're not the doctor. I said, even those you've given those certificates that are 100 doctors are not doctors. I said, okay, no problem.
So you see, a member of not hallowed body.
So that's this. But it's important that we sensitize people, and I like what you are doing by discussing this matter this morning, because a lot of people will, listening to news and walk through, and walk over it. So it's something that we need to do continuously. Put it in the conscience of people. Something like Amaka may even want to start answering doctor, and all the rest of it without going through the process. So, but if she knows
that herself doctor, the next two the second
doctor. So, but if she realizes that she's breaching a law, and there are consequences for breaching that law, maybe that will also provide a reset, to our mindset to be very much cautious. But more importantly, we need to keep talking about, and it's only in Nigeria. I'm happy you mentioned our own mentality. We take our things overboard. Other countries award their people honorary COSA degrees. They don't brand themselves as doctors. They don't write doctors as a prefix to their names and all that. But here, because of our quest for competition and egoistic tendency, everybody. In fact, I call it more about inferiority complex. Because it's only somebody with inferiority complex who want to be announced anytime. Yeah. Most people who are rich rarely announce themselves. They hide. But if these people that are inferior, they want to make noise for you to know they are rich and not the rest of it. So, but sensitization first, then the law needs to be amended to provide a framework for enforcement. As it stands now, it's something that cannot be enforced.
Okay, somebody who pleaded an anonymity said, please, in the court, when he saw the promotion of this program, he said, look, let's encourage the media to shame those who get this and are using it. That while you're waiting for a consequential law or penalty that will now, broadly have some specific remedies for answering that.
Yes.
He said, like, shaming sentence is enough.
Yeah.
So when you know somebody who is answering it, who is not supposed to answer it, take the person up, challenge it, say you are fake, you're not real, that's not who you are. So what do you say to this line of thought?
It cannot work in Nigeria.
It calls shaming sentence.
No, it cannot work in Nigeria. First of all, as a people, we are shameless. You cannot shame the shamed. That's number one point. The second point is that for the people whom the person is asking to shame somebody, they are hungry. And recall that most people that have been awarded honorary COSA are not just ordinary persons. It's either they have the resources in terms of money, or they have done one or two other things, so they are influential. And most of the MCs and media houses, derive their life from some of these people. So in other words, in fact, they will be the one that will even hype it. If there are no consequences for them hyping it. So it won't work. The only way it will work will be for people like us, you, myself, and others, who earn their PhDs and who feel pain that those who didn't go through that pain. It's like when some people say, why is it that the military people will see somebody wearing camouflage in Nigeria and they are beating them? Yeah. When they remember all the stress they went through, the torture they went through in becoming a soldier, then you are wearing it to come and pass manga. It turns them. So it could be the same thing, but in other words, it wouldn't just be shaming, because people like us were exposed. So you don't shame. But when you're addressing, for somebody like me, if you are not a PhD holder, you're asking doctor and they're addressing, if I pick up the microphone, I'll still recall your name. I'll say Chief Sre Luchenna Nieke, LAD Honorary COSA. I say, Chief is an honorable man. I don't know why people want to drag me to what he doesn't like.
You make a joke out of it.
I'll make a joke out of it. But I've sent this signal immediately. So shaming in that aspect will not work both for two reasons. The first one is that those who will believe will do the shaming won't do the shaming because they need something to live. And because of the nature of our economy, they are not empowered to do that. Then, secondly, for us in this country, we can be shamed. If we can be shamed, there are a lot of things people do, even now that politics have not really commenced fully, that are doing. You'll be wondering, can this person get involved in this kind of thing? But they are doing it shamelessly. So we can't be shamed as a people. As long as money will come in from it.
Okay, there's a twist. Somebody now asked me, what happens to honorary degrees conferred by foreign universities? How does it apply? How it is only those awarded in Nigeria should not answer it?
No. It's everywhere. That guideline was specific.
Once you are
what is honorary degree, you should not use it. And there are a lot of other guidelines there because the first of all is that no university that are yet to start offering PhDs are allowed to award that. That cannot happen. That is what the rule states. So there are things, and I've said also that no politically exposed person or self-nominee is related. Then the other thing is that also every university, as part of that guidelines, should. That is why we want NUC to begin to enforce immediately. On their website, they should publish the criteria for awarding of honorary consultant degrees. And for all those they've also awarded, the name should be on their websites and why they were awarded those. So it brings transparency. So we know who is who. And you don't also announce until the Senate and the Council has approved, because it was from the Council to approve these things. So until the Council has approved, even the person who will receive will not know he will receive. So when the Council has approved the nominees, the three now that is a maximum of three approved, then you inform the person. If the person wants to accept you, then you shouldn't collect any money whatsoever from the person.
For where?
Those are the guidelines. So how it will happen is what, how this will be enforced is what we don't know yet.
Okay, somebody was also asking prior to this program, would this be taken into retrospective effect? What of those who have been awarded prior to March 2026?
Yes.
As long as you have it, you shouldn't.
As long as you have it, you are not supposed to answer the doctor. Remember, it's a guideline. The guideline provides the structure and the template for awarding it henceforth. And also provided a directives or interpretation to the ones that have been awarded earlier on. So in other words, if you have been awarded honorary consultant degree in the past, the rule says, and that has been the rule all along, you know that people are not compliant. You are not an academic doctor. You didn't earn it. And for that reason, you are not permitted in law and even by conventions to precede your name with a doctor. The same way you cannot write PhD after. You cannot now start assuming that you're a doctor when you
can put PhD after.
When you can put PhD after.
Well, we'll just take a short break. When we'll come back, we'll continue this conversation.